Login accepted.
Oh, oh, spoilers. All right. Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to our Tuesday general meeting. Today will be me and Maida will be going over Windows and Active Directory. Um, oh, so this is our schedule. Currently September 23rd. Um, this is our intro to Windows talk, but just want to go over a couple things before we dive in. Yeah, become a member. Yeah, please, please become a member. We need, well, I'm not gonna say but yeah, please. And we actually have an announcement from one of our Swinterns, Alexander.
Hi, I'm Alexander Hafty, and I'm a Swintern for Swift, and I'm also a campus ambassador for an organization I'd like to talk to you guys about called STEM Advantage. So, STEM Advantage is an organization that allows you to get professional development resources and learning uh, for completely free, and you can get resources, you can get help like uh, resume and career building. You can get help they can help pay for certifications and subscriptions to websites like LinkedIn Premium and LeetCode Plus, and so much more. Um, STEM Advantage is not affiliated with any school, which allows you to get one-on-one mentoring as well as just networking with working professionals in all sorts of industries like software engineering, AI, and even cybersecurity. As someone who's been in this organization for since last year, I could tell you from myself that STEM Advantage has really helped me get to know more professionals who are working in cybersecurity industry and learn about resources that could help me further my career in cybersecurity. So, if you're interested, if you're a freshman and are interested in learning more, there's going to be two meetings tomorrow, a virtual info session, one at 12 p.m. and one at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And if you are a sophomore or even a junior, if you're a junior, you may be able to join. There's one let's see, on Friday from 12 to 1 p.m. And then I believe there's also one from tomorrow at 6 p.m. for people who are sophomores or even juniors. So yeah, if you have any questions after the meeting, feel free to talk to me. And thank you. Hope you join STEM Advantage.
We will ask from the Thank you, Alexander. So yeah, we'll get started now. Who am I? I am Raymond Atienza, uh, the president of Swift. Um, Last year I was a Swintern lead, and yeah, it's my fourth year, and I'm gone after this. So yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Mava, and I am the Alumni Relations Coordinator for this year. I am a third year CS major and cyber minor, and I'm also on the CCDC team. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about like basic Windows navigation, and then Raymond's going to be talking about Active Directory after. So I'm going to be talking about Windows in like a more blue teaming perspective today, and like most of what I'm going to be talking about is related to like the Windows server. Also, if you went to the CCDC boot camp and you're like, I remember these slides, you do because they're edited from the CCDC slides. But Raymond's slides are not CCDC, so like if you went to the CCDC boot camp, like wait for those. Um, so two different ways to interact with the Windows server is the GUI, which stands for Graphic User Interface, and CLI, which stands for Command Line Interface. The command line interface is a bit more efficient to get things done, but like if you kind of like a graphic view and you're not like super technical yet, it's a bit easier. There's also something called the command prompt on Windows, but that one is a bit outdated, but you would use it if you're trying to like run a script across multiple servers that have different versions of PowerShell, because like sometimes the same commands won't work for everything. But yeah, PowerShell, pretty much every Windows Server version comes out with more updates to PowerShell. And the commands are formatted in verb noun syntax, and here are some examples of that. It is integrated with the Windows API, so you can manage pretty much like anything with it. And everything is treated as an object in PowerShell. Some important GUI panes that I'm going to be going over a bit more in detail later are regedit, File Explorer, confmanagement.msc, services.msc, control panel, task manager, server manager, and gpedit.msc. So regedit is very important because most configurations are going to link back to a registry key. And this is kind of just like Windows's internal database of configurations. And there's kind of like a hierarchy in the registry, kind of how you can like see in that picture over there. You have hives, and within hives there are keys, and within keys there are values. And so you can assign values to these keys, and the values and locations of these keys can affect how the computer works. So for an example, you can change a key that changes the language used by the Windows host. It can be modified with the CLI. So you can write, for example, like PowerShell scripts to change things within the registry to automate that, or you can also access it faster than clicking through like the GUI here. Um, so yeah, it can also be used to gain persistence. If you're talking about like the blue team perspective of things, this is where you need to like make sure you know like how all of this works, because there are a lot of keys that like if you give them an executable path as their value, they're going to automatically execute that program. So like for example, like it could execute like on startup or like when a user clicks a button. The file system, probably most of you know what the file system is, but it holds all the data, even the registry that I was talking about in the last slide. Um, And these are some paths to know. The system32 file, the users, sorry, the system32 directory, the users directory, and the program files. And Windows has like highly configurable permissions, which is why a lot of enterprises will use them in like instead of Linux sometimes. So yeah, services are binaries or executables that are designed to run in the background to serve some sort of OS or third-party functionality. So some examples of this are the FileZilla server service and BitLocker, and they're going to be identified by one of two things. You're going to have a display name, which is like more simple for us to understand, and then there's also a service name, which is shorter, and it's used to refer to the service internally. Then you have the control panel. And with the control panel, you can do things like um, it's kind of just like the central place to manage anything that isn't um, Windows Active Directory or service related. And you can manage the firewall, enable or disable remote desktop, enable user account control, and manage network adapters. Um, and enabling user account control. So that's kind of for when accounts try to do certain actions on Windows, you can like configure what they're prompted with. Like for example, when an account tries to do something that requires to be run as an administrator, it's going to prompt them. You can for example, like prompt them for the password. So you can configure that on there. And managing network adapters. So this is kind of like where you can, for example, configure the IP of a server. Processes originate from executable files, and some examples are apps or system binaries. And you can create and kill them mostly, unless like the OS doesn't want you to do that. So mostly. But some types of the processes are an app, like ones that are apps, ones that run in the background, and ones that are like Windows level. And these ones are system level and are auto-launched. So server manager, you're not gonna be like finding this on like Workstation, but it is available on server editions of Windows. You can have easy GUI access to some tools, so it's like really helpful. Can I just like want to like mess around and like see what is on there? But you can manage roles and features for server editions in here, and you can also manage, I mean, some roles and features are optional add-ons for the OS, like for example, IIS, web server, Active Directory, domain services, and Microsoft Defender. Um, so yeah, Microsoft Defender. It's kind of like, I guess you can kind of call it like an antivirus program. It's installed by default on every on every Windows operating system except Server 2012. It can be uninstalled on server editions through the server manager. And how effective it is depends on the Windows updates and like which version of the operating system you are running. And you can use it to scan, exclude, and remediate malicious files. Um, so Raymond's going to be expanding more on this later. And oh wait, can you like move this thing? Like the X button. Okay. Um, anyway, GP edit. It stands for Group Policy Editor, and it will let administrators set rules that control how the operating system behaves, especially around security and system management. So you can access it through SecPol, and you can edit account policies or local policies through this. And account policies are kind of just like how user accounts behave. And local policies are like, for example, like an audit policy. Like, for example, if you log on, like a logon success or a failure, or security options like for example, if you need to press Control Alt Delete before you log on. You can configure these with something called group policy objects. And it's kind of just like a collection of settings that you're going to apply. And everything is managed in everything here is going to be managed through a group policy object. You can also use something called an administrative template, and those are kind of like predefined sets of settings that Microsoft gives you, and you can like edit these a bit. So yeah, Windows Firewall. It is stateful. So that kind of means that you're not going to have to explicitly allow outbound and inbound for the same thing in order for it to work. So if like some of you know how Linux works, this is like different from Linux. There are three different ways to interact with Windows firewall rules. The first one is the GUI. It's way more user-friendly than like, for example, using PowerShell, which I'm going to go over in the next slide. So to get here, you're going to go to Control Panel, System and Security, and then Windows Defender Firewall and go to Advanced Settings, and you should be able to see something like that. The second way, as I was talking about before, is PowerShell. It's way faster than like clicking through the whole GUI. And you can also use scripting and automation through this one. So some examples of using PowerShell are to view firewall rules, you would use something like getNet firewall rule. And to create a new rule, you can also allow or block traffic on ports coming from programs by using a local port or program. And then an example of creating a new rule is like new net firewall rule. And then you can have different like options for that, like display name, direction, outbound, which would be outbound or inbound, and then the action would be allow or block. So yeah, that is it for basic Windows navigation. I'm going to be handing it over to Raymond for Active Directory now.
Thank you, Maida. So what is Active Directory? Well, Active Directory specifically is a directory service for Windows environments, but you guys are wondering what's what's a directory service? So essentially, a directory service is a central like database that stores and manages information, or in other words, they're referred to as objects in a network. So for instance, an object could be, a user account, groups, devices such as computers and printers. I'll give you like a practical use of Active Directory. So um, who has like used like the computers at the library or somewhere at school? How would you like log in? Anyone? Who said that? Thank you. Yes, you use our Cal Poly Pomona account instead of like, a local desktop machine. Why? Well, that's because Active Directory. So yeah, so Active Directory, it runs on a domain controller, which is usually a Windows Server operating system. It provides like a level of security by via like authentication or authorization. So for instance, let's say you're a USC student and you try to log in with like you try to access a Cal Poly like a computer with your USC credentials. Uh Basically Cal Poly or like computer's gonna say no, you don't exist in this network or environment, so I'm gonna have to, decline you. You can't access our computers. So that's like the level of security it would provide. And also it authorizes you could also authorizes like users within like the environment to essentially use services. So um let's say you want to like access like the teacher like admin web page, but you're a student. So you somehow got like the link to like the teacher webpage, but then for some reason you can't log in because again you're not authorized because only teachers could use it, and again you are a student. So those are like the levels of security it provides. But aside from like a security boundary, it also allows you to basically centralize or manage everything in like one machine. So um let's say if we didn't have Active Directory and you want to use like a computer in the library, well you would have to like essentially put like all user accounts on like every machine, and of course that would take like that would be very very time consuming. So but instead of like doing that, you use Active Directory in your organization. So it essentially allows you to create multiple users and then implement policies on users as well as like other objects and all that good stuff. Oh, so next we'll be talking about LDAP, which is essentially the language of Active Directory. It's mostly used to like query or modify information. So what Active Directory does, it essentially, so since everything is like an object, again, like users, all that good stuff, it's usually stored in like the domain controller's like database. Let's say you want to like find information about a user or a resource, you would LDAP would be used to like basically, yeah, query that information, search for users. It's also like typically known as like the phone book. So if you want to look things up, um, Active Directory, we use LDAP to essentially communicate. There's also LDAP-S, which is a more secure version of LDAP by being, encrypted. Or like the packets are like being sent are encrypted in LDAP-S. Oh, why did I go back? Oh. Next, talk about domains. So basically, a domain is like one environment. So essentially, it contains all objects in like the environment. So at least one domain controller is needed. Again, that stores, information about the objects in a network or allows you to, implement policies, stuff like that. It relies on, so in Active Directory, DNS, or in other words, domain name system, is very important because it relies heavily on DNS for name resolution. So if you're familiar with like last week's lab and you're like setting up like a device, you usually have to like identify like a IP address. Well, Active Directory doesn't like use IP addresses really to communicate with like other devices in the network. It would use DNS. So instead of like 192.168 blah blah blah, it would be referring to like a device as its DNS name, which would be like pc.calpolyswift.org essentially. And then the forest is essentially a collection of domains. But if you have one domain only, if you're working with only one domain, it's essentially the forest or like the root. A forest could also provide like a security boundary across like multiple domains, and these are like referred to as trusts. So first off, I have like a visual representation of just one domain. So the domain name would be wait, this mouse is kind of scuffed, sorry. Member.calpoly.swift. So this like identifies the entire domain. And so this little guy is our user. And essentially this domain stores, objects. So there's like 4 users, 3 computers, a printer, and a file share. So yeah, and yeah, basically, well, since there's only one domain, only members of this domain could access it. Yeah. And then when we have like again multiple domains in play, we have trust. So there's like different types of trust. So in this example, we have a unidirectional trust. So this domain has a printer, and only this domain has access to it. And this domain only allows this, or sorry, so the domain on the right has access to this domain on the left that has the printer, and then the direction of trust is applied. So like basically it's just a one-way trust. So yeah. Oh. There's also a bidirectional trust. So instead of like the trust being one way, the trust goes both ways. So um this domain could access this domain as well and vice versa, basically. Yeah. And there could also be like a hierarchical relationship. So domain A would be considered like the root domain. So let's call it calpolyswift.org, for instance. And then which is like the main domain. And then the main you could when you join or when you create new domains and join it to the original domain, they're essentially like subdomains or like children of that root domain. So by default, when you add like multiple domains to a like forest, they would have implied trust. So what that means is that pretty much every domain in this on this left side has like access to each other. But you could set it in a way where, let's say you want domain B and domain A to have a trust as well as like domain C, but then you don't want someone from domain C or a resource from domain C to access domain A and like vice versa. So yeah, those are pretty much how like trust works. And again, structure tree is part of forest, so basically what I previously described, just a group of related domains together. And then sites are physical locations. So like physical components that you could access, but sometimes like they could be in like different areas, like geologically. So pretty important for like so if you have like multiple sites, you would need your domain controller basically needs like the ability to basically replicate all data and like all sites. So let's say you have one domain in California, and then another domain in like, I don't know, Idaho or something. And then pretty much your those two domains have to be in sync so they could have like essentially the same uh info and access and all that. And then schema just basically defines what an object is and like what kind of attributes it must have. So again, by default, a regular like the default schema would be users, objects, groups, users, groups, printers, and then some attributes. Like let's say for user, you would some like key information that needs to be included would be like their email address, first name, last name, all that. Yeah. And there's a visual representation of like a tree. So Cowboy Swift is the root domain, and then it has like subdomains or child domains. Yeah. Okay, next we're going over OUs and group policies. So um OUs essentially is just a folder. So um you basically like you could put users, groups, and all that objects into that folder, and then basically basically used to um organize like different users groups together. But also the main like I guess important point for or important concept of an organizational unit is that you could implement policies onto multiple like users or basically whatever's in that container or folder, you could place like policies in that. So for instance, um, you could have that organizational unit change like their passwords every like 15 days or something. Or let's say, oh yeah, by the way, you implement group policies through GPEdit, which was like mentioned previously in the slides when we were going over Windows. But um, yeah, some use cases for like GPEdit would be, let's say you wanted to, let's say we wanted like a group of computers to have Roblox installed for some reason. So you could implement a group policy object onto a container with like all these computers in it and have it automatically deploy, Roblox. So yeah. Um yeah, it's also a good way to just like standardize like the environment. So sorry, what was that? Exactly. You can also implement like security configurations onto organizational units. Next we have authentication. So there's like the two big ones in Windows Active Directory. So the first one is Kerberos. So it's ticket based. Very like essentially it's a way to like where you don't have to like use your password like every time you want to like access a resource or something in Active Directory. So I'll go over like how it works specifically, but in later slides. But yeah, Kerberos is just ticket based. And then NTLM, it's more old school. It's more of a challenge response authentication. So every time you want to access a resource that doesn't have Kerberos or it's like still using NTLM, pretty much you need to use a password every time, and that could be dangerous because you're just typing your password every time, and yeah. So this is how NTLM works. So first, um, client would want to authenticate. So it would send their username, or let's say you want to access like a resource. You provide your credential. So, or yeah, the client sends their username, and the NTLM or the host would respond with the challenge, which would be like a random number. The number we would be like different every time, like the user would try to again use that service like multiple times. And then so yeah, the host would or the service would provide a random number to which the client or the user would have to essentially input their password and then basically solve it by like hashing it. And then if like the credentials are correct and then like the user has like the right, authorization, the host would like allow access. And then for Kerberos, works a little bit different. So we have a user. So instead of like, inputting like their password or something, it would request a oh yeah, request a ticket granting ticket from what is a key distribution center or um yeah, Kerberos uh ticket granting uh yeah, the key distribution center, which is usually like a user account. So yeah, the user would request a ticket, and then if they have the proper authentic or like authorization, they would um the key distribution center would supply the client or user with the TGT. And then let's say the user wants to access a service within like the domain or something. They request a service ticket for that service. And then if they have like the proper like authorization, the key distribution center would essentially provide the service ticket with, or essentially they'll give them a ticket granting service to which now there's a resource server that the client wants to access. Um, they want to use the service and they have like a service ticket provided from the key distribution center. And then the resource server would provide access to the service. So there's some like exploits. So DR logon, it's pretty bad. Pretty much gives like an attacker like root access to a domain. Um, and then Eternal Blue, this one exploits like SMB v1, so it's a file share. And then if an attacker executes like a remote code, you could famously like um destroy that system by implementing like ransomware. And then there's like Petit Potem and then Kerberoasting. Yeah, those are like some exploits you should look out for, or try to set up your domain in a way where um none of those are like possible. I guess like good practice as a good practice would be strong password requirements. I guess like have like a good minimum character length, say like 7, and then have your have frequent password changes for like all domain users and services that have like passwords. If possible, implement like multi-factor authentication. Um, and use LDAP-S, or make sure like your domain has LDAP-S instead of like regular LDAP. Um, prioritize Kerberos authentication when you can. I know of like some like services and like Active Directory kind of rely on NTLM. So there is like a way to disable NTLM and like transition to Kerberos, but it could be like very difficult and troublesome. So yeah. And then of course, if you have like any unused services, just disable it. And then restrict user privileges and block any sus firewalls. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys found this informative. If you want, there's a Friday workshop related to this. So, um, yeah, hope you guys come out. We'll post an announcement on like officials. So, I mean, we'll post an announcement later. So, yeah, have a good one. Oh, one more thing. Yeah, Cyberforce, the briefing packet. We're holding tryouts this Saturday. So, oh yeah, Cyberforce. If you want to get like competition experience, essentially it's a 6 with you and 5 other people are flying out to Chicago. Have like a environment that you have to basically protect, or yeah, basically there's like a scuffed environment you have to like pretty much patch, as well as some CTF challenges. So, oh yeah, you want to? I'll hand it off to Jessica.
Wait, real quick, I want to add another thing too. Aside from that, Cyberforce is just a really good way to get your hands dirty and being experienced. Again, we heavily emphasize on a lot of blue teaming and red teaming because that's when you get your hands on literally like how the infrastructure works and how you navigate through it. And also, Cyberforce is hosted by the Department of Energy, like the actual US government itself. So please, give it a try. We will be hosting the briefing packet as Raymond mentioned, and it should be happening on Saturday, this Saturday on the 27th, around 1 to 5 p.m. Please keep a lookout on that on your Discord and Instagram and everything. So yeah. Do we have any questions aside from that for Cyberforce?
It's gonna be released, or it's gonna be announced on the Swift Discord. All right. Wait, let me check on Zoom. I guess no one has any questions. Oh, yeah, your laptop. Oh yeah, we're also gonna put out a form so we could get people who are interested in like doing our lab some creds to our Camino pod. So yeah. So for the most part, just bring your laptop and keep an eye out on announcements. All right, that should be all. Thank you everyone. Have a great rest of your Tuesday and hope to see you on Friday.